Welcome back, guys, to the Great Ace Attorney 2 Resolve, where last episode, Ryunosuke receiving Susato's letter about the ruse that called her back to Japan, we delved into her case notes to begin a case from the past in the memoirs of the Clouded Kokoro. After meeting a recovering Olive Green in hospital after the original Clouded Kokoro case, we were informed in a room of another murder having taken place at the Garrideb household, as the other tenant, William Shamspeare, has been found by Mr. Natsume. We now try to figure out what has happened. What a terrible thing to have happened! It's only been 3 days since I was arrested for the incident on the pavement outside. And then, having finally regained my freedom, it starts happening all over again. Endless existence of excruciating experiences! So the victim lived here on the ground floor and your room is just one story up, isn't it? Yes, that's right. In a way, we were neighbors, I suppose. So did you know the victim? Were you friends? What's the matter with Soseki-san now? It was an innocent enough question, wasn't it? Why does he seem so shaken by it? Well, I suppose he wasn't a complete stranger. But did he ever invite me to his room? Never! On my honor, I swear it! What an extreme reaction. You're probably wishing you'd never asked now, aren't you, Mr. Naruhodo? When we found him here, I felt wretched, which is why I sent word asking you to come. Through that inspector over there! The one that's just appeared. Mr. Sholmes, what are you doing? Ah, you need only observe to know it, my dear fellow. Investigating naturally. There's nothing natural about that pose. Mr. Sholmes, have you made some miraculous discovery? Patience, my dear madame, patience. We've not been here in this room 5 minutes. And so far, all I've managed to deduce is what actually happened. My goodness! But isn't that everything we need to know, Mr. Sholmes? Now that you propose the idea, I believe one could indeed see it that way. At the present time, I have managed to draw 2 incontrovertible conclusions. The first, that there was a physical struggle here last night in which the victim fought for his life. Ah! Ah! Mr. Natsume, what's wrong? Is something that Mr. Sholmes said significant somehow? No, don't mind me. Forget I was here. And my second conclusion is that there was a poison lingering in the air here last night that passed the victim's lips. No, nonsense! Ah! All right, Mr. Natsume, why are you reacting so extremely to Mr. Sholmes' deductions? No, please, pretend I'm not here. Invisible, ineffable, inscrutable, insignificant. Impossible to ignore. You must tell us everything, Mr. Sholmes. Spare no detail. But of course, let the theatrical tragedy before us be unraveled by my great deductions, presented for your pleasure in 2 acts. Hey, we've heard some truly astounding great deductions from Mr. Sholmes in the past. No doubt this will be no exception. What miracles will unfold before our eyes this time? So, my dear fellows, for your delight and wonder, let the curtain rise. For Herlock Sholmes, Logic and Reasoning Spectacular, Act 1. Do it for us, Sholmes. The game is afoot. Topic 1. The cause of death. Careful observation of the victim reveals to us the events that transpired in this disconsolate room last night. Foam in the mouth of the deceased clearly indicates the use of poison. Next to the victim, we notice a large dining plate which contains, you will observe, 1/2 of a sizable bar of soap. Meaningful, indubitably. Why is this soap set so purposely upon the dish? Like the victim's last supper, in fact, yes. Could it be that the man was about to eat it? Of course, the fork reveals the answer. But look, it appears that the young man's appetite was his undoing. Taking up arms in the form of his cutlery, the victim engaged in a deadly battle for his life. Yet the struggle against his hunger was in vain, for in the end he couldn't resist devouring the slippery feast. But London's foul soap is besmirched by foul poison. Yes, the victim's life was claimed by poison that tainted the contents of the plate. The soap and the lava about the young man's mouth are too perfectly matched to ignore. The cause of death was clearly intoxication due to excessive ingestion of foul soap. Though personally, I have a greater interest in the taste of foul candle wax, of course. What? Okay. Poisoning from soap ingestion. Topic 2. Suicide or murder? The cause of death identified, we proceed to Act 2, where we ponder the next question. Was this suicide or murder? The audience will recall the death occurred during the victim's last supper. Did the man dine and die alone? This single teacup suggests the answer. To draw a conclusion on such meager evidence would be foolish, however, certainly. But the careful criminal could have absconded with his own cup to cover his tracks. Well, allow me to lift the veil of doubt, my dear fellow. Indeed, what reveals the answer, of course, is the broken lock. Although forced open now, at the time of the incident, this door was locked. And the sole key was in the victim's pocket. In other words, when the victim consumed the poison, he must have been alone. Alone with his inferior soap from whence wafted an inferior scent. And with that acrid aroma lingering in the air, the victim met his end in tragic solitude. We can take comfort only in the fact that his soul was well cleansed on its way to the hereafter. No possible perpetrator present. So you're saying suicide by soap thus concludes the final act of Herlock Sholmes' great deduction. Weirder things have happened in Ace Attorney. Everyone else here is not very convinced, though. Not at all. There's just one thing, Mr. Sholmes. You are disposed to identifying just one thing, aren't you, Mr. Naruhodo? Pray, what concerns you? Well, no matter how hungry he was, do you really think the man would have eaten soap? It is quite apparent that this man had barely a penny to his name. It is a curious thing, but to one so destitute, soap can suddenly appear quite irresistibly appetizing. How extraordinary! In truth, I have tried a little soap myself in the past. You've eaten it, you mean? My dear fellow, it was some time ago now. My postulation was that it would cleanse my gut. And did it? As I writhed in agony on the floor and spilt the contents of my stomach, yes, I believe it did. The experience taught me a valuable lesson. Soap is quite poisonous. It has an unpleasant taste and leads to great discomfort. In summary, I cannot recommend it. Believe me, I wouldn't eat it even if you did. There's something that troubles me as well, actually. Oh, what's that? It's Mr. Natsume. Ah! I couldn't help noticing him shuddering and quivering out of the corner of my eye. Almost as if Mr. Sholmes' deductions touched a nerve somehow. No, nonsense. Well, that clenched teeth episode didn't last. I think, judging by Mr. Natsume's reaction, the great detective's deductions may need some gentle corrections in order to reach the actual truth. Yes, Mr. Sholmes' observations and deductions are sometimes a little too sharp. He has a tendency to hit the nail on the side of the head and drive it in an obtuse angle. When he does that, it falls to us to straighten things out. Alright then, let's see what we can do. Yes, we must pick out the keywords in Mr. Sholmes' quite brilliant deductions, and discreetly exchange them for something that makes a little more sense. If we can do that, I'm sure we'll arrive at what Mr. Sholmes meant to say in the first place. In that case, are you ready for the second performance of the day? Once again, my dear fellows, for your continued delight and wonder, let the curtain rise. For Herlock Sholmes, Logic and Reasoning Spectacular, Act 1. Hold it, Mr. Sholmes, we gotta correct ya. Poisoning from soap ingestion. Careful observation of the victim reveals to us the events that transpired in this disconsolate room last night. Foam at the mouth of the deceased clearly indicates the use of poison. And next to the victim, we notice a large dining plate which contains, you will observe, 1/2 of a sizable bar of soap. Meaningful? Indubitably. Why is this soap set so purposely upon the disc? Purposefully? Like the victim's last supper, in fact, yes. Could it be that the man was about to eat it? Of course. The fork reveals the answer. I love that look. Well, you can't deny the fork implies the man was eating something or about to eat something. Yes, that's true. If I were to decide to eat some soap, I should prefer to use a fork than to attempt it with chopsticks. And of course, only half of the bar of soap is left on the plate. But might there not be some other explanation? Something material that proves whether or not the man really ate some soap. There's a weird splotch over here. And we can look at stuff, of course. Oh, it's on the floor. I suppose you'd eat soap with a fork, would you? I don't think it's a question of which implement you use. You shouldn't eat soap full stop. But then why? Why does the man have a fork in his hand? Oh dear, I understand your frustration, Mr. Naruhodo. Please don't take it out on me. The point is, if we decide the man used his fork to eat the soap, we wouldn't be changing Mr. Sholmes' deduction. So we really ought to consider some other clues. Well, I was just having a look, but the angle literally just shot up for the other piece that perfectly matches that kind of break, doesn't it? Look, there's more soap on the floor here. Mrs. Shamspeare must really have loved the stuff. Let's not jump to conclusions, Mr. Naruhodo. Look closely at this soap. You see that it would fit together perfectly with a half bar on the table. What the? How could that be? I think that they are two halves of the same bar that broke apart. And let's present it.
Take that!
Could it be that the man was about to eat it? Of course. The other piece of soap reveals the answer. It being the other half of the soap on the table. In short, the victim was not eating soap at all. But it's obvious, really, for no depths of hunger could drive any man to attempt to eat soap. Even I, with my unquenchable thirst for practical knowledge, took only a single bite. But that begs the question of how the man was poisoned, because there's no sign of any food on the table. An excellent observation, Mr. Naruhodo, and one that furnishes us with the answer we seek. For London's foul soap is besmirched by foul poison. Yes, the victim's life was claimed by poison that tainted the contents of the plate. Mr. Sholmes is still pushing the soap argument then. Perhaps he's suggesting the man licked the soap rather than ate it. If soap in London is that poisonous, I don't think I want to be washing my hands with it. But there are no signs of any food in this room at all. Of course, food isn't the only thing that passes people's lips, is it? Well, then we are going to... Well, you can see this on the thing, but you can't actually hit that by the look of it. Still check out the fork. Well, I guess we're checking this. Yes, a Western vessel for the serving of infusions of dried tea leaves. It's a teacup, Mr. Naruhodo, as you well know. Stop putting on airs. And it's empty. Ah, so we've already established that the victim wasn't eating soap when he died. However, there's significant evidence to suggest that he was drinking tea. My thoughts exactly.
Take that!
There's a good delivery method, right? Yes, the victim's life was claimed by poison that tainted the teacup. Indeed, cups have been the vessel of choice for practicing poisoners over the centuries. And it would appear that this victim drank every last drop. There's no sign of food anywhere in the room. Which leads us to the immutable conclusion. The cause of death was clearly intoxication due to the ingestion of poison contained in this teacup. Poison in the tea. Alright, so suicide or murder with no possible perpetrator present. Cause of death identified, we proceed to Act 2 where we ponder the next question. Was this suicide or murder? The audience will recall that death occurred during the victim's last supper. Did the man dine and die alone? The single teacup suggests the answer. Ah, the Western vessel for infused hot drinks again. It's already featured heavily in our deductions so far. Yes, we can imagine that shortly before his death, Mr. Shamspeare was having a drink of tea. There would be nothing remarkable about that, but what troubles me is Mr. Natsume's reaction when he heard Mr. Sholmes suggest it. There's more to this deduction than it seems. We must closely examine the scene of the crime again for some more clues. Okay, what are we looking at then? You got the fork. How much of the more scene can I actually see? Foam. Oh, ha ha! It's another Western vessel for infused. It's a teacup! And it too is empty. Given that he's actually holding this one in his hand, we can assume that this is the cup from which Mr. Shamspeare was actually drinking. But if that's the case, this changes everything. Everything we've deduced up to now is turned on its head. I have a bad feeling about this. I almost don't want to say it. Yes, I know exactly how you feel. It looks like there was more people in this room on that night.
Take that!
Definitely. More people. Or at least one more. Did the man dine and die alone? This other teacup suggests the answer. Yes, there were 2 teacups in this room all along. Ah! In other words, this is a strong indication that at the victim's last supper, there was a guest present. At the very least, we can say now with certainty, as somebody else was here in this room last night, taking tea with the victim. What are you talking about? Utterly, unbelievably, unjustly, unreasonable. To draw a conclusion on such meager evidence would be foolish, however, certainly. In which case, what more can we deduce about this possible guest at the table? Well, allow me to lift the veil of doubt, my dear fellow. Do you mean to say you know who exactly was in this room at the time of the victim's death? Indeed. What reveals the answer, of course, is the broken lock. I'm not sure I like where this deduction is going now. I'm afraid it's too late to go back to the halcyon days of eating too much soap. But the identity of the guest who was in here last night when the victim passed away is something I have very bad feeling about. Well, you can try to ignore your feelings, but we cannot ignore the truth, Mr. Naruhodo. No, I suppose not. Time to look around again. So obviously we're never looking at that, because that's never the thing. One day it might be the thing. That'd be cool. Even Mr. Shamspeare didn't eat candles, it seems. We've already established that he didn't eat soap either. Do you think perhaps the guest brought this candle here last night? Even if he or she did, does it reveal anything about the guest's identity? Good point. There goes my idea. Snuffed out like that candle will be. You sigh so deeply, Mr. Naruhodo, you're in danger of blowing out the flame. It's empty. Empty of liquid, but full of air. That makes you think, doesn't it? It makes me think that you're full of hot air. We should be thinking about who else was in the room at the time. Bother. Solo-san's quipping response was clever than my original riddle. More to the point, she seems to have had enough of your crap, to be honest. At first glance, it seems that the only things in this room are the makeshift stage and the costumes. I overlooked these 3 books initially. I wonder what they are. Let's see. The titles read The Picture of Monsieur Lecoq, Canterbury Yearnings, and Emile Fagabelou. Wait, I'm sure I've heard those titles before. It could just be an incredible coincidence, but they're the exact same 3 books that Mr. Natsume purchased the other day. What? Yes, on the day of the unfortunate incident when Miss Green was stabbed. Soseki-san had just been to the bookshop and brought them. That's right. And now those 3 titles are here in the room of the victim. And Mr. Natsume claims never to have been here before. What does this mean, do you think? I really don't know what to make of it. Pile of familiar books. Oh no. Oh no.
Take that!
Indeed, what reveals the answer, of course, is the pile of familiar books. Why so? It's no mere coincidence that these 3 titles are here in this room. It's the link to the truth. Ah! Mr. Natsume, you purchased these books 4 days ago at a second-hand bookshop. That's just a coincidence! In that case, you will be able to bring the same 3 titles from your own room, will you not? This very moment. No, never! Non-negotiable! If you can't bring your own copies here, it proves that these 3 books are in fact yours. Having purchased the books 4 days ago and returned to your lodgings, you were arrested the very next day. So you could conceivably have brought the books here on that evening, but you never mentioned that. In other words, you could only have brought these 3 books here to the victim's room. Yes, he walks like that. Last night, having returned to your lodgings after the trial concluded at the Old Bailey. What beautiful style. In short, there was only one possible conclusion. The victim died here in this room last night as a result of poisoning. And that same night, the victim had a visitor. And that visitor was you, Mr. Soseki Natsume. Thus concludes the final act of Herlock Sholmes' great deduction. Soseki Natsume at the scene. Our deduction is complete. Hopefully, with more to come. Not again! Not again! Not again! Not again! Well then, Mr. Natsume. It would appear you're gonna have to accompany me down to the yard. Again. Wait! Hold your horses! Yes? Door! Key! Locked! Entry! Exit! Entirely impossible! He's so flustered he's being even stranger than normal. What? You think that's an alibi? You could have just made a copy. What? You live in the same building after all. You'd have had plenty of opportunity, I'm sure. But... Misery me! Sorry, sir. You'll get your chance to give your side of the story later. The facts speak for themselves, Mr. Mustache. You horrible Herlock Sholmes! He really has found himself an arch rival now, hasn't he? Come on now, no dilly-dallying. Outside, there's a carriage waiting. Locum student Mr. Naruhodo Esquire! I never imagined I'd be in this position again, but... You have to help me, please, please! I'm innocent! Alright, I understand. We'll come to your cell later and talk about it. And one more thing. Oh, yes? My poor little kitty cat. Please give him his breakfast for me. And so, his evil curse still apparently unbroken, Soseki-san found himself once again the prime suspect in a case of murder. Thanks to the incriminating deduction of the great detective. My dear fellow, that honor belongs to you. We're trying to pass the buck a little bit here. Well, at least that means Inspector Gregson is no longer here. We can examine the crime scene in more detail now. Yes, that's right. And of course... What? Have you forgotten what the inspector mentioned before? It was the landlord, Mr. Garrideb, who discovered Mr. Shamspeare. Ah, Mr. John Garrideb, yes. I expect we could find him in his sitting room on the top floor as usual. Right, you must remember to go and talk to him later then. Well, we won't tally-ho our way there yet. Let's look at this vessel. Ah, one of the teacups that Mr. Shamspeare and his guest drank from last night. But don't go drinking from the Mr. Naruhodo. There's a bit of poison inside. I'm not planning on drinking any, don't worry. Anyway, the cups are both empty. That's true. So, one was Mr. Shamspeare's, and the other must be the cup that Mr. Natsume was drinking from. But Soseki-san wasn't poisoned, of course. Perhaps we should take these so we can examine them in more detail later. The pair of teacups has been entered into the court record. The one with the green line around the rim was Mr. Natsume's. Fortunately, there's like a difference. There's an identifying factor. Oh, the poor man. So young to die. Do you suppose it was a very painful death, being poisoned as he was? I don't know. All we could do now is hope that he'll be reborn to a better life. Yes, I suppose you're right. I wonder. Do you think that putting our hands together in a Japanese prayer will help a British soul? Sorry? I made sure I had a reference at the ready for just such an occasion as this, actually. This book is entitled The Beginner's Guide to Praying for the Departed, the British Way. I'll just reread it now. One moment. There's quite a spine on that book, isn't there? Look at these extravagant, bright costumes. Somehow they look out of place in this room, with its grim, shady goings on. This one looks like a king's attire. A king? I've always dreamt of being a king. Oh, I think you'd be more suited to a feudal lord, a daimyo or such like. But chonmage top knot. Every Japanese man wishes he had a chonmage. Oh, you'd look wonderful with one, and you already have the sword. Can you imagine what would happen if I walked around the streets of London with a chonmage and a sword? Well, I don't know what'll happen when people say, "You pronounced it wrong!" in the comments, so... Oh, God. There's not much on these shelves, is there? Just this wine glass and bottle. And both of them are cracked. Yes, not much use, are they? What's the matter? Oh, I was just reminded of the Reaper, that's all. Prosecutor Lord Van Zeeks. Yes, he's so reckless with his wine glasses. I was thinking it's a waste and that he should donate some to the needy. You can suggest it next time we meet. Of course, the bricked up windows. As we've seen from the outside, the window was completely bricked up. A vestige of the former window tax that Britons had to pay. What strange things they used to tax in Great Britain. I mean, making people pay for the number of windows they had in a property? It's extraordinary. It's heartbreaking to think of the poor having to block up their windows just to avoid an unaffordable tax. Oh, what is it, Mr. Zato? If you look closely, a number of the bricks are loose. Oh yes, it looks as though an amateur has broken out a few of them just here. Was it Mr. Shamspeare, did I wonder, being the lodger renting this room? Ah, look at this, Mr. Naruhodo. On the outside, there's a little ledge. And there's something on it. What? Outside? Bruh, it's so cold outside. You can feel it through this gap. It did snow all last night. It would be cold. But more importantly, what is it on the ledge out there? What are those snow-covered lumps? It's more bars of soap. Soap? What are bars of soap doing lined up on a ledge outside the window? I have no idea. But the pair of them look rather charming like that. Still, that's very strange, isn't it? Bars of soap lined up outside the window. I think perhaps we should take one. There are two, after all. Oh dear. I suppose we could. Oh, what's this? Look here at this soap. Ah! Do you see, in the middle there? There's a patch that's a different color. It's sort of transparent, but some sort of fancy design, I suppose. Only in Great Britain. Looks like the Hinomaru flag of Japan, doesn't it? How wonderful. It's probably a very expensive brand. Expensive? Then what's it doing in this ramshackle old room? The bar of soap has been entered into the court record. Well, I'd say that bar of soap is incredibly suspicious to me. This part is a different color. It's an exquisite design, isn't it? Trust the British should turn a boring bar of soap into something special. I quite like it. It reminds me of the Hinomaru design of the Japanese flag. I expect this is rather expensive soap. That doesn't seem likely, given who it belongs to. There's nothing to actually view via the soap then? Is there anything extra to view on this? Apart from the red line inside. This must be the cup that Mr. Shamspeare was drinking from them. It's stained on the inside. Tea does that, I'm afraid, even green tea. Oh, really? I've never noticed before. You've never noticed? Well, I never leave it in the cup long enough to leave a mark. I like to gulp it down. Drink tea while it's hot. That's the Japanese way, isn't it? That's the best way. Oh dear, so many people seem to have the wrong idea about our culture. Most of them are Japanese. But that's interesting. Residue and none. This is the teacup from which Mr. Natsume was drinking. Yes, unlike the other one, the inside of the cup is completely clean. I suppose he must have drunk the contents before the tea had a chance to leave a mark. I always gulp it down too. Sorry, Mr. Naruhodo. Well, if you just sip it little by little, it goes cold. Clearly, I shall have to instruct you in the proper way to take tea. That got updated. There is no tea ring on the inside of Mr. Natsume's cup. So we did a good bit of exploratory stuff. So many chips in these cups, that's for sure. Oh, China. So, we've still got the nearby street map. We got the secondhand book receipt as well about things that were found. I don't know if they necessarily need examining, but there's still more of this room that does need examining. Including this makeshift stage over here. So we'll get to that, including that down there, and that down there. That's got to be interesting too. Next time on The Great Ace Attorney 2, Resolve. As obviously, we're going to soon be defending Mr. Soseki Natsume all over again. I'll see you guys next time for more. Bye-bye.